Let me get this shared to my page real quick.
Good evening, everybody. Matt Geary here for Geek Pride on this Sunday evening. With me tonight, we have the usual face of Peter Ray Allison.
Good evening, everyone.
And our special guest, Matthew Webb.
Howdy.
Howdy. You sound very American.
Thank you.
You're joining us from Texas, I believe.
Yes, I am from, I was born and raised in Texas. I'm coming to you live from Austin, Texas.
Nice. Oh, wow. I've got a friend, a Northern Irish friend, who currently resides in Houston, and he's the most American non-American you're gonna get. He's like he's got guns and he's got a hat, and he's just sort of fully embracing being Texan at this moment.
My cowboy hat is not here. Otherwise, I would wear it for you.
Okay, Mr. Webb, tell me about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? Give us something.
My name is Matthew Webb. I am a partner in a company called Jackalope Live Action Studios, and we do very high-end live action events or LARP events here in Texas and around the country. Basically creating these like high-end theatrical LARP events for people, and we are partners with Paradox Interactive. We do licensed Vampire the Masquerade events, and we're also partners with Untitled doing licensed Cyberpunk 2020 events for them.
So hang on, I did actually bring you on to talk about the vampire, but I'm a massive fan of Cyberpunk.
Oh, thank you.
Tell me how you kind of bringing about the licensed Cyberpunk 2020, Cyberpunk Red and events. How did that come about?
It was just a series of conversations where we talked to Talsorian, we traded emails with him, we had some one-on-one stuff online, and eventually they were like, sure. They looked at the kind of events we ran, and they said, we want that kind of quality experience, and we want to partner with you. And that was pretty much how it worked. And, Maximum Mike is a fantastic and amazing guy. I got to talk to him a few times, and it was just business conversations, because this is a business we run. It's not like a lot of LARPs are kind of hobbies, and I love those LARPs, don't get me wrong, but this was kind of like, hashing out just like any license deal for any sort of licensed RPG product.
That's fantastic. Now, before we get into the meat of the conversation, could you just stand up? Oh, it's standing up. But are you sure that jacket you're wearing? Because that is a fantastic jacket.
Oh, this is my Game Runner jacket. This has got my pronoun pin. It's got patches from various games I've run and just various things people have given me. The weirdest thing on it is these are the now discontinued Girl Scout patches for storytelling.
Brilliant.
The Boy Scouts don't have a storytelling patch.
Wow.
I don't know why. It sounds ridiculous.
And on the back, I recognize a certain image. Yeah, that's from the Vampire First Edition. Yep, that's very cool.
Yeah, and this is actually a memorial patch for a friend of mine who passed away, who was a huge LARPer. So he comes with me, and this is my game running jacket. So he comes to me with all the games that I run.
Oh, that's really sweet.
Thank you. Noxie was a great guy.
Yeah. Anyway, so apologies for that diversion, but before we got started, I saw that the graphic on the back of your jacket. I recognize that.
Oh yeah. Actually, that's a T-shirt that got cut up. Onyx Path actually sells them. You can go to the Onyx Path Redbubble store, and they still sell all the classic T-shirt patterns, and you can pick those up still.
Oh, nice. So yeah, JackalopeLARP is a lot more than just LARP, isn't it? It's not just turning up with your mates, having a bit of roleplay, having a bit of a sword fight. This is quite different.
Yes. It's first and foremost, it's a community. We go through a lot of onboarding people and making sure that they understand the Jackalope way of doing things. And Jackalope specializes in consent-based LARPing as opposed to conflict-based LARPing. So we do not have sword fight contests. We do not have what you would call boffer play, and we do not have the more traditional parlor LARP sort of rock paper scissors style vampire games. What we do is everything in the game happens because you consent to it happening to you. You pre-negotiate with other players how you want scenes to turn out and how you want them to work out, and that's how that works. And so it's a very different sort of experience than what you might normally associate with LARPing, because it takes on a much more theatrical and like character and story focused style. Because what we do is we tell people, like, it's okay to lose. In fact, you're encouraged to lose. We have this phrase called play to lose or play to lift, where you're trying to play in such a way that creates a more immersive and more story-like experience for people. And having those moments where you lose are just as important as you win, because people who win all the time are very boring and have very boring lives. So these consent-based systems, there have been games run with them in the United States, but we're one of the premier studios for doing that sort of stuff. And we're the ones who are doing most of the work in the vampire space with that.
Okay. What, just for the people who are unfamiliar with the term, what is onboarding exactly?
Oh, onboarding. So we do workshops for every single game. Like our premiere event, which is the night in question, which is a Sabbat horror event. It's set in 1998, and it features the monstrous sort of the bad guys of the Vampire the Masquerade universe taking over this rave out in the country. And it's this very from dusk till dawn horror experience. But we do like 3 hours of workshops before then, teaching people how to consent to physical contact, how to play fight, how to engage with this world, and how to treat your fellow players. And we kind of have a phrase that we make people repeat, which is people are more important than LARP. And we kind of imbue you with that value that you're really there to share an awesome experience with people and create an experience together, rather than in most like traditional style games, it's kind of you against the world or you against other players. And this is very much like, no, we're coming together for a night to tell an awesome story together and explore these characters with each other. And we're partners in doing that. And that's kind of how we pull people into how to play these consent-based games. And it's a really powerful and like really incredible experience when it happens, where everybody is kind of on the same page.
I'm not right. So I am not fully up in my LARP knowledge. I play Dungeons and Dragons on a Thursday night with Pete and some of the other groups. LARP is something I have seen, the fantasy style ones. And in fact, the first ever sort of live action role playing type thing I experienced was Vampire the Masquerade when I was in university, because the guys who did that, they were doing this sort of kind of rock paper scissors thing to sort of kind of do combat and stuff. And I vividly remember that. But what you talk about consent, a consent game? I don't understand. What can you explain that to me? I'm not sort of grasping it.
Sure. So with the game that you saw with rock, paper, scissors, that's a conflict-based game, right? It's more like in board games, it's not collaborative. It's you're contesting against each other in some way. And so if I want to hit you, right, hit your character, LARPs do that in two ways. They either use a buffer weapon and you actually physically go through like the physical contest of doing that, or you play rock, paper, scissors and do some sort of system in which there is a winner and a loser, and the winner gets what they want and the loser doesn't. And in a consent-based game, what happens is I say to you, hey, I want to hit your character and I want to I want to ring their bells and knock you to the ground and, shout at you. And you can say no, or you can say, sure, but I get up and I sock you on and we tossle on the floor, and then we get pulled apart. And you say okay, and I say okay to that, and then we play that out because that's what we consented to. That's what we negotiated out. And what happens in those games is it becomes I have to sell you on what I want to do to you, and it has to serve some sort of story purpose, and it has to work for both characters in some way. And that's what makes it a consent-based system, is that you consent to it and everyone can say no to what happens to it. And the cool thing about that is that because there's so much control and everyone controls like their own levels of escalation, there's a lot more sort of escalation and story beats that you can explore there, because you don't really have to be afraid of losing your character. You don't have to be afraid of your character going in a direction you don't want, because you have so much control over what happens. You can go in some really cool directions.
So there's no competition. It's literally it is purely story driven and trying to make that narrative as interesting as possible.
Yeah, and like you can pre-negotiate scenes. Like one of the things that happens in our games is people sometimes months ahead of time say, "Hey, I want your and my character to get into a sword fight." And they get into a sword fight, but it's stage acted. We actually had two people who were familiar with stage sword acting, and they had like a cage match with broadswords at our last game. And it was played out. There was like there's fake blood packets that went off. They actually put through this whole effort. And it was this great thing because it was two vampires basically deciding to finally have it out with each other while they're surrounded with barbed wire, chain link fences, and people screaming at them. And it was a very kind of Thunderdome sort of moment. And all of that was negotiated like a month ahead of time. And they actually spent the night before playing out, and the guy who lost agreed to lose. He agreed to collapse into, a bloody mess at the end of it. It was a great moment, and he got to go out with an absolute bang. It was fantastic.
So what about so basically in our D&D games, they're very, these guys are very attached to their characters. If anything happens to their characters, I get the impression that things wouldn't go down too well. So how does that work in a game like that, where you're sort of encouraged for your characters to sort of lose, like you said? So how did people feel about that?
Well, one of the big differences is it's a one shot, right? Nobody gets out alive. Everybody dies at the end of the night. And, or all the characters disappear at the end of the night. You're done. So if you die an hour ahead of time, but you die gloriously, you're still kind of on the winning team. You win if everyone has a great time. Right.
Okay.
And, if you really want your character to live to the end of the night, you can arrange that. There is such a thing as just getting a good old fashioned butt kicking. But what you get is we actually tell people, listen, nobody gets out of this with their character. All these characters go away at the end of the night. So drive them like a stolen car while you're being chased by the cops. It's a demolition derby. And it helps that all these characters are pre-written. You're assigned a character that is written by the staff, and all these characters are kind of set up to go off. So everyone hits the ground going 90 miles per hour in our games, and they're all set up to be in conflict with one another. And they're all set up with something to do like immediately. And that is part of the, beauty of the game.
Yeah, because I remember playing the UK vampire LARPs, and Camera UK as it was known at the time, back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And one of the best moments I've ever had was playing a Ravnos in the with the Camera group, and all I did for one night was I played cards. I didn't go out and like politic, attack people, or just get stuck in. My character sat there, played cards with all the other characters, and it was great because it was just pure role play.
Yeah, and this kind of allows you to also have that action while also having the role play aspect.
Yeah. How does that? I mean, you explained like the consent in advance, but how does the consent work when you're in the game? Like, cause I imagine it can be quite jarring when someone comes up to you and goes, "Oh, excuse me, can we quickly negotiate this?"
You'd be surprised how quickly it goes. I think we teach people to say, you cross your fingers and you say negotiation violence, and they respond negotiation violence, and it's often very, very quick. And it's certainly slower than, or certainly faster than any sort of mechanical figuring out a fight. So we teach people how to do this quickly but comprehensively, and sometimes it takes a little bit longer. But for the most part, it's not very jarring, right? It goes very, very, very quickly, and we teach people how to do it like in a concise but forward-looking manner that fully explains what you're going to do without blocking the entire scene up.
Yeah, so you leave it open for the other person to kind of negotiate back and find a common middle ground.
Right. So you start out, like, we teach keywords as part of what we teach, where you say negotiation and the general thing you want to negotiate, like negotiation, violence, negotiation, intimacy, because it's like, if you want to kiss somebody or something, that also needs to be negotiated.
Yeah.
And they repeat it back to you, you talk about it, and it ends when both sides say agreed, and then you do it.
Okay. So I can get my head around this, because this is a completely different new world for me. So is this negotiation done pre-game, or is this during the game? So I'm going to do this. Are you okay with that? And then it happens, or is there sort of like a sort of each person has a sort of kind of script that they kind of turn around and go, well, I would like to do this and I would like to do this. Are you okay with that? And then it plays out like a script in the game.
A little bit of both of the last two that you described. It happens in game. You can pre-negotiate stuff, just to be clear, but the negotiation in game is kind of like, hey, do you want to do that thing we discussed? And then you say yes. But you can negotiate in game and basically say, this is what I want to do. And the person can come back and say, okay, but don't do this instead. And you figure that out, and then it happens. And then you play out that negotiated action. And, there's small variations. I say I'm going to play punch you and you're going to knock me over, but it turns out I fell into a chair. But that kind of stuff doesn't really break the flow of the negotiated action, because you're playing out a scene as part of a story that you set before you. So it definitely happens in game, and it would have to happen in game, because when you have 150 people playing a vampire rave gone wrong, you're never going to be able to slate everything that's going to happen. But then you have much more elaborate negotiated moments that can be negotiated way ahead of time.
One thing I want to ask is, how, you mentioned the characters are created in advance and assigned to the players. How much of their arc within that one shot is pre-designated? How much is it mapped out, or is it kind of just left deliberately? You're playing this character, they've got to do this. How you get there is up to you.
It really depends on the game. In the night in question, which is our horror event, we have themes that we give you, and problems and various issues, you hate this person, or you're in love with this person, or you're trying to prove yourself to whoever, or you're trying to set up a drug deal, and we give you those kind of things, but those are all preset, and then we just let the chaos happen, and we just set everyone loose. Sometimes things are more prescribed, and you are required for certain things to happen by the end of the game. So, but in the night in question, the overall night has an arc, and when certain songs play on the dance floor, the rules of the game change.
Oh, that's a neat way of kind of controlling the plot.
Right. And so, at the first third of the night in question, no one's allowed to embrace everyone and all the vampires incognito, because the majority of the characters are mortals that are going to get trapped there and mass embraced by vampires. And then in the second third of the game, which is signified by the band playing or a certain song, or we've done the lights on the dance floor have gone red. Then you're allowed to embrace one person. And then one song that is scoured into the brain of all of our players is Ballroom Blitz, which is the signal that, okay, we've taken over enough. You can go and just mass slaughter, and we've taken over the rave. And that's when Ballroom Blitz plays, is a moment in the game in which everyone just goes crazy and like people get like, sucked dry on the dance floor and like, attacked. And these are all things that are pre-negotiated out and stuff. And that's when everything goes crazy. And but this song that is out of place in this 90s rave starts playing, and that sets the beats between the various acts of the game. So that game itself has an act structure, but we don't tell people that they individually have to do certain things at certain times.
I see. That's quite neatly done, because I like the way you don't explicitly tell people, oh, it's third act now. You just basically play this track and suddenly everyone knows that it's the third act. That's really neatly done.
Yeah, and it doesn't break the immersion or the...
Exactly.
Right, because the idea is that this is something the vampires have already figured out for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to like several LARPs here in the UK, most notably Lorien Trust and the Gathering and at Locker Park. But this feels like an entire new level compared to typical UK LARPs. This seems much bigger scale.
I don't think that it's bigger scale than ones like Vampire or Empire and stuff, as far as number of people, but I can't speak to UK LARPs because I've never been to one, so I don't want to like say, oh yeah, I'm better than them. But there's
go on, just say it.
I'm really not. It's like it's not a matter of being better. It's a matter of this is a very different sort of theatrical experience.
It's very different.
Right. And I played in the rock, paper, scissors games, and I played in the wacky bat sort of just go out and do line battles with each other's games. And I love those. But it's a completely different flavor. It's like saying, I like racing games and first person shooters. Are they the same? No, they're completely different. Right.
How did JackalopeLARP come about? Because this feels like a very bespoke and specific company, LARP company especially.
So about 5 years ago, me and my friend Steve Metz, who's one of the other creative partners in the project, decided that we wanted to start running these kind of games. And these games were already popular in Europe, especially in the Nordic countries. And I had played in several that were run, kind of imported into here by some friends of mine, Bjarke Peterson and Johanna. Hi, if you're watching. And they kind of got us in, sold me on this style of game. So I went to my friend Steve and I said, I really want to start running these kind of games. I've, done experimental LARPs and kind of like black box sort of LARPs, and written a few, and I wanted to start running the higher end sort of experiences.
What are black box LARPs before we go any further?
Black box LARPs are way less ambitious, like setting wise, and they're often little tiny, very concentrated games for like 5 or 6 or maybe 10 people, and it's like as if you could play them in a black box theater, but they're very avant-garde sometimes. They're very conceptual. There's one that I wrote called Shades, where you're literally just ghosts trying to remember who they were and how they died and why they died. And it's like just a 3 or 4 hour experience, and it's played just in your plain clothes, and it's much more like almost a improvisational theater experiment.
Okay, thank you. So sorry, I need to kind of clarify that, but okay.
Oh no, there's this entire like strange like ecosystem of different types of LARPs that all have this common idea of wouldn't it be cool to play a character and embody it physically in some sort of space, and that goes all the way from like your parlor games and the boffer style games to these black box games, which are very conceptual and very character based, to these high impact theatrical events like we run through Jackalope. And so when Jackalope started, we started conversations with several groups of people. We started a conversation with the World of Darkness team over at Paradox, which we had worked with for their Enlightenment in Blood Berlin game. We started conversations with Untitled Chapter. We even, our first game was actually a charity game that was written with the help of 2-Bit Games, who did This War of Mine. And we did yeah, we did a game based on this war of mine called A War of Our Own, which is about the civilian experience in a war zone. And we raised, I believe, $3,000 for children in conflict
Wow.
for that game, which
Congratulations.
helps get clothing and educational materials to children in refugee camps. And it's hard to think of a more worthy cause than that.
Yeah.
And I'm really proud of that to this day.
Fantastic. I mean, I think like you've alluded to Paradox. I mean, it's obviously that has been the official vampire LARPs for you. How did that come about exactly? Because that's really taken off for you guys, it seems.
So we started working with them. We were brought in to help with World of Darkness Berlin, which was a big Vampire the Masquerade World of Darkness conference in Berlin, Germany. And I made some connections there with the Paradox team officially. I had known the organizers of Enlightenment and Blood, which was this big, beautiful game that was played in East Berlin in like all these clubs they had written out into East Berlin. So you actually had to walk between them, and it was a great experience. Had over 300 players, and it was this amazing like immersive environment. It's one of the best LARPs I've ever played in. And we started working with them, and we started those conversations, and we said to them, hey, we want to try doing something like really bold and different in the vampire LARP sphere. And they had already run like an Anarch game. They had run like a Camarilla style game with Convention of Thorns. And then we said, that leaves one person. We'd like to do the Sabbat. And they were like, are you sure? I'm like, oh, yes, we're very sure we want to do the Sabbat. And I had happened to know a lot of people who are into horror LARPing and also with like haunted houses. And we started coming up with this idea of this rave out in the country that goes wrong because the Sabbat take it over and, turn half the people into vampires and eat the other half. And it evolved into this concept, and we pitched it. They said, fine, we're going to trust you to run this safely and sanely. And it exploded, and we're looking at our fourth run this year, and it's been 150 plus players every single time.
Yeah. Is this kind of repeating the same night essentially in question, or is it?
Yes.
Right,
but it never has ever turned out the same.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Yeah. The overall beats have remained the same, but the characters, see, the thing is you get a character, but we understand you're going to invest yourself into it. And so we operate by the theory that the human brain cannot contain more than 4 paragraphs at any time of character, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to invest that character with his own or their own power and your own personality when you get them. So they're going to be very, very different every single time. And, we have people saying like, hey, I played, the True Believer last time. They have titles like this, but your True Believer was completely different than my True Believer. Right. And the choices that are made, there's no way with the chaos of, 160, 170 characters interacting with each other is going to turn out the same way every single time.
So how do you organize or make sure with 170 odd people playing a game, how do you make sure that there's no sort of kind of personal conflict, and how do you keep things on track with that many people on board?
So first of all, it starts with culture. It starts with presuming good faith. It starts with telling people that if they don't respect their fellow players and they don't act appropriately, I will kick their asses out. And beyond that, if we're talking about like the data, the like how safe the event is, we have about a 1 for every 10 players. We have 1 out of character full-time security staffer, and they patrol the event. They have zones that they cover, and they're always there. And you can identify them at the event because they're wearing these high visibility vests that kind of make them stand out, which strangely makes them easier to ignore because you immediately know what they are, so you can just let your eyes go over them. And those people are there to make sure that everything that's happening is, sane and consensual. It's funny though, actually, one of the places that we studied on how to do that kind of safety system was we went to BDSM club training classes. And I'm like, oh, if they can handle what they're doing, we can handle it's probably,
Pineapple.
yeah.
Pineapple.
Yeah,
exactly.
they have like hallmark of BDSM is like safe, sane, and consensual.
Yeah, and it's very similar. It's a very similar ethos, though very different event going on, right?
Yeah.
We have baseline rules like no sexual contact of any kind,
Yeah.
nothing that can nothing a reasonable person would perceive as sex. No full nudity, no real weapons, no firearms props. All these sorts of things that if you want to bring a weapon-like prop, we check it at registration and we tag it, and we make sure that they're both of the visual quality we want and safe. And so there's that baseline sort of thing, but also it's just like we have people there that are watching and making sure everything that is happening is correct, right, and within our bounds of our rules.
We've got loads of comments going on in the chat here, but Vancouver by Night says aftercare is very important. I'm not sure what that means.
Aftercare, also known as debrief. So aftercare is more of a concept from BDSM, but we have a related concept in LARP called debriefing, which is and some people use the term aftercare, but it's basically you've gone through this really intense emotional experience, and like your lizard brain doesn't know the difference between a play experience and a real experience. So you find yourself being a bundle of these emotions. So we do things to help you kind of de-roll to kind of like get out of that headspace. Like at the end of the night in question, it's we actually set this facade in front of the game site on fire. It burns down. Right. And everybody gets evacuated from this rave site and stands outside of it, a safe distance away. And everybody watches it while Don't Fear the Reaper plays. And afterwards, that we play this heartbeat sound that kind of also began the night. And we, tell people to close their eyes, basically tell them, listen, you were a horrible monster. Now you need to be a kind person. And you had a great experience with everyone here tonight, and we encourage everybody to just turn, like, after this like almost meditative scene plays, because watching something burn down is almost a spiritual experience into itself. It just is. It's hypnotic.
I've done Burning Man back in 2006, and that is like a full-on virtual experience.
Yeah, and so it's like helps you like it bookends everything, right? And we help people, and we tell everyone, like, turn and shake the hand and introduce yourself as a person to the people around you. And that helps people de-roll. And people stand in this field outside of this rockabilly rave site that we have in the middle of the Crown, Texas. And, we have lights and all that stuff going on, but they stand there for 30 minutes, an hour, just hugging people, talking to each other, and basically like really cementing this idea of a community together, because you've just gone through this experience where there was a blood rave and there was people were murdering each other and screaming and being horrible and all this stuff. And at the end, it's like, okay, now it's time to be a person. There's Johanna Peterson actually said, if you're going to play in a world of darkness, you have to have an out of character world of kindness. I butchered that quote. But it's really important to me to have a situation where we can do this dark stuff, because out of character, we trust and support each other.
The way you describe the night in question, it feels a lot like that first scene in Blade, the original Blade fame.
Yes.
Like when you said blood, I thought, I know exactly.
Or the showers of blood, yeah.
Exactly. Do you actually have the showers of blood, or?
Yep, that's something that happens in the third act. Is that we actually have a
fantastic.
Yep, we go through a 55-gallon drum of blood in order to do that.
Actual blood, like pig's
No.
blood and stuff, or just sort of?
No, it is a mixture of non-staining. It's made out of food gelatin, water, and tempera paint, or children's poster paint, as you might know it as.
Yeah.
And it's a mix that we use because you don't want to use real blood. That's disgusting and also expensive.
Yes.
We're not trying. Yeah, we might be pretty hardcore, but we're not that hardcore.
Wow, this is some wacky stuff right
I
here,
mean,
man.
I would love to do that. I mean, as far as I'm aware, we don't have anything like that in the UK at the moment. I do know there is what they're calling a Premier LARP, Vampire LARP, coming up in next year. The name is blanking on me. Organized by
Giovanni the Last Supper.
Exactly, that's it. That sounds quite good. But
I am going there. I'm going there. Orion and Sable. Sable, who run it, are fantastic. Very different feel. That is a Renaissance political LARP, which is set where people are auctioning off like magical humans to vampires for the embrace. So very, very different than this 1998 like splatterpunk horror experience. A very different experience.
Yeah, but like I said, like other than like what's coming up in next year, we've not had anything like that in the UK. So I mean, was there any chance that have you ever been tempted to kind of migrate the Night in Question to the UK?
If we could find the site and some partners to do it with, I would love to pitch that to Paradox.
Okay, I'll start looking for sites tomorrow.
Okay. Hey, if you have a warehouse somewhere that we could all get rigged up in, I would love to run it in the UK. That would be fantastic.
Well, you got loads of all of the main sort of kind of industrial cities like Birmingham, Manchester. They're all gonna have
Derby.
Yeah,
Derby's where
just
I live.
make sure it's someplace that's halfway safe to walk at night.
Wow.
Yeah. I think 170 LARPers turning up, and it's like we'll just scare everyone.
So I can imagine some hard types just still looking in a bunch of people dressed as vampires being covered in blood and just saying, nah, not this one.
I have done LARP, like what's called parlor LARPs in the UK, basically where like the vampire, the mind's eye feeder system. It's sent back in the day when just before it closed down back in the 2000s. Pretty much every city in the UK had their own vampire LARP group, and I was part of the Sheffield one. And every now and then, this rather lost patron of a pub would wander up into the function room, take one look at what was going on, at all these bizarrely dressed people, turn slightly pale, and just walk straight back down again.
Do you know what? I actually think people, because like I've to be honest, most of the girlfriends I have are all non-nerds, non-geeks, and I've taken some to like Comic-Cons and things like that, and they see these people dressed up or doing something different, and their first sort of thought is maybe this is weird, but then they get completely sort of engrossed by it. And I remember one of my exes turning around and going, I'm just so amazed by this whole thing. It's just like, I just love people watching. So I reckon if you had something like that, because you have like in Manchester, you have the Comic-Con, in London and stuff like that, and you've got people wandering around in all kinds of get-ups, and I reckon people would actually quite enjoy it. I think it would be, you get obviously you get the odd person who is doesn't grasp it, but I reckon.
Well, in the Night in Question, we get people that are like, have bloody necks and are getting attacked with chainsaws and are screaming bloody murder,
Right.
Because it's this very like Texas Chainsaw Massacre sort of vibe going on in that game where people are just like, okay, towards the end of the night, it's what I like to call participatory horror, where, you get to be the terrible person. And we have players who have volunteered to simply be the extra who dies over and over again, to be victim number 4 in the story, and they love it. They have a lot of fun just dying over and over again, and going through and having those giving those moments to other characters where it's like, okay, you're a vampire now you get to be a like mass feed on one person until they're dead and stuff like that. So we've had people who showed up with like Aztec scream whistles and things just to make horrible noises with. So it's an interesting experience.
Reminds me of the film Near Dark as well, actually.
Oh yeah, I love that film. Near Dark
Also,
is fantastic.
yeah.
It's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
Better than
Near
Lost
Dark,
World.
From Dusk Till Dawn,
Yeah.
Blade. Those are, if you keep those in mind, you're absolutely on the right track.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice. I mean, I remember like back in the day, that there'll be like some core players of Vampire, but there'll be people there who would spend just as much time watching what was going on as they were playing, just because they enjoyed watching the drama unfold.
Yeah, and I think that's important for the theatrical experience of it all. We're actually not just doing the Sabbat thing too. Starting next year, we're going to start doing Elysium Chronicles, which is another license event, which is going to be completely different in the spectrum. It's going to be the Ancilla and Elders of the Camarilla like going after each other, and it's going to that's going to be, we have these like ballroom places that we're looking at renting. It was supposed to start last year, but this thing's been going on. You might have heard of it, which kind of puts a damper on large in-person events. Just a little bit.
Yeah. Actually, you say Camarilla. In the UK, we call it Camarilla. So have we been saying it wrong the entire time?
So it's both ways.
Okay.
It is pronounced both ways. I say Camarilla because I come from a part of the country where there's a lot of Spanish speakers, and so I see a Spanish word like Camarilla, and it's like, okay, it's pronounced like tortilla, but some people say Camarilla, so it's both ways. And I've always, when I personally run games, if you're playing more of an old world sort of vampire who would be familiar with Spanish and the double L, I always say Camarilla, and if I'm playing a more new world vampire, American sort of one, I always say Camarilla. But my default I always fall to is Camarilla.
That's fair enough. Okay. Yeah, actually, and you also mentioned COVID and the big C word. So it's been decimated the LARP scene for 2 years. Now, fingers crossed, things seem to be calming down at last, or at least be not as bad.
Yeah.
Cases in the UK, for example, cases are still high. They're dropping, but they're still quite high. But the hospital admission rate is way down, and the fatalities are way down. So it seems like we're into kind of more transmissible but less severe variant, which maps out the most life cycle and most virus.
Cough there.
Yeah, sorry, my apologies.
Now, what's going to happen for Jackalope this coming year?
So last year we actually did run the third run of the night in question, but we did it. It was vaccines required. We did it in September, and we had 0 cases. And we did fever checks at the door. We had infrared camera for doing that, and we managed to do that. I'm hoping by the time next September, next game comes up, we are going to be ready, and things seem to be winding down in the correct direction at that particular juncture. So, I mean, obviously, if the super Delta Omicron transformer variant comes out, and we're fighting zombies, at the end of next year, that's entirely. But I think flexibility is really key there, because we canceled. This would have been we were supposed to do it the year before when we did it, and we ended up canceling it. It was really heartbreaking. So last year we did it vaccination required, and this year we just have to see what works. We just have to stay on our feet, and bless our players, they have been very understanding. They have been very, very understanding of what's going on, and they understand that it's a difficult thing to run during this time.
Yeah, I mean, Matt and I were at the UK Games Expo, the big board gaming and role-playing game convention in Birmingham. Was it July? I think it was July. And yeah, it was masked on the entire time. You had COVID tests. You had to show you have COVID tests. You had to be vaccinated. And there were pings, but as far as I'm aware, it was just we were notified on the NHS COVID-19 app that there'd been close proximity to someone, but as far as where there was no kind of major outbreaks there.
Yeah, we had 0 cases, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Everyone was very safe going to and from the game. And usually, we like supporting this town called Bastrop, which is the one that's closest to the site that's out in the country. And that's where we stay and we do our workshops. And we like taking our players out to a restaurant and bar and supporting the town in that way. But this year we ended up doing we bought like $300 worth of barbecue and just did it at the hotel. And we did a buffet style, but had everyone mask when they're at the buffet. So, no one's breathing on all the food and that sort of stuff. So when that happened, that's the kind of precautions we took, and it really, really paid off. I don't know if we would have done that if with the Omicron variant doing what it was doing.
Yeah.
So it's always like going with your conscience, being being a good person and understanding what's going on and making the best judgment you can at that point. And I only decided to go forward with it after my stepson actually works for the Pennsylvania Department of Health with their vaccine program. So he's like only 2 steps away from the director of the CDC, and he has not to get into it, but basically has a master's in biostatistics. And I had a conversation with him and said, okay, at this particular juncture, if everyone is vaccinated, is it safe to run an event like this? And then he said to me, it's no worse than your chances at that point are with everyone vaccinated. You could in good conscience run it.
Yeah.
I don't think he would have said the same thing during Omicron, because Omicron decided to be a tricksy hobbit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I'm a freelance journalist and I've been covering COVID for the BBC, and I've been lucky enough to speak to various virus experts, and I think it was almost expected that something like Omicron would come along, but they never expected it to be that transmissible.
Yeah.
It can be milder, but not as transmissible as they expected it to be.
Yeah. But like I said, I'm not an expert, but I just decided to defer to experts.
Yeah.
And we had medical people and people who were involved in public health who basically said, if you did 100% vaxxed, if you're doing fever checks, and most people are like isolating before and after the event, you can do this. And that was the moment in which we said, we're going to go ahead and do it.
That's nice. I mean, like Jackalope sounds a lot to me more of a holiday. Like a themed holiday, a weekend break rather than just going to a LARP. Like you see, there's hotels, you take them out for meals, and it feels a lot like most obviously like business class. This feels like a standard class. This feels like business class, high end.
Yeah, I mean it's basically like a little mini convention, or it's almost like a retreat of sorts, right? Where on Friday we have a big meal together. On Saturday afternoon, everybody is doing workshopping and character stuff together, and then there's this big night for 6 hours where we just go full throttle. And then on Sunday, people have there's a brunch that everyone goes to on Sunday, or most people go to on Sunday that are not flying out. And it's just a great time, 100%. And it really reinforces this community. And we have this fantastic group of players that have been built up over the years, not just for this event, but for our other ones as well.
Talking about lockdown and COVID, you said you're quite big on TikTok, like one of your main sort of platforms. And was that like everybody else who's joined TikTok because of lockdown? Was that how you started?
I was on TikTok before, just doing like cosplay stuff with friends of mine who were far away from me, and it was just a way of sharing stuff with LARP friends that I wasn't seeing very much. And then lockdown happened, and it became more and more of a thing, and just some things that I did took off, and I became like one of the Vampire the Masquerade guys on TikTok. It was a lot of fun.
Because they've got their own little sections, don't you? So you've got like D&D TikTok, you've got gamer TikTok, you've got sort of history TikTok and things like that. I listen to the history ones, the D&D ones, obviously the dog ones because of my dog. So there's lots of little sort of kind of catered areas, little areas for you on the. Were you a part of the Vantalord and Rogue debate? On which side did you take?
As storytellers, we remain neutral because we both maintain order and chaos. So, as CTO of VTM Talk, as we're known of, I was asked about it, and I declared us as neutral parties in the conflict because obviously we had to be arbiters.
Being in dog TikTok, I just kept myself out of it, to be honest. But what's your biggest video? How many views? What's the most viral thing you've had?
The most viral thing I've done recently is I simply found dice that don't have the pips in the correct order. That they're the Think Twice dice by West Studio, and I simply rolled them and I said, I'm not going to apologize for this. And all the pips are in chaotic formations. And I just said, and everyone is like, you monster. And I think that had 300,000 views and 2,000 comments, most of which are like, you will apologize for that right now. That caused me physical pain.
It's mad how sort of random stuff. I started TikTok on lockdown simply because my ex at the time was just like, let's do some things together. Nothing happened, and it got to the point where nobody was interested in a beardy Irishman sort of doing quotes from Anchorman and stuff like that. It just wasn't doing anything. And then I put my dog on it, and it just went boo, just like skyrocketed. Like we got up to 30,000 followers, and then one day I put a video on of him coming in from the snow, and it hit 13.1 million views, and
Jesus
God, and all he was doing was me opening the door to him. He was in the snow. He makes this little whimper because he doesn't want to be in the snow, and then he comes in and he shakes, and that's it. 13.1 million views, and it's just like that's insane. That's mad.
The weirdest stuff goes big. Like I did a video just discussing vampires and werewolves and their relative power levels in the world of darkness, and that blew up to hundreds of views or hundreds of thousands of views. And I think maybe 10% of the people there understood I was talking about the world of darkness, and the rest of them were like arguing about it. It like for real, and I'm like, this is a tabletop game, people. I don't know what fight you think I'm starting.
Well, it's like you get loads because I'm a massive Warhammer fan and stuff. So you've got the guy who's arguing that how Star Trek, how the Enterprise could take on the 40K universe, and there's so much stuff going on, like how the Enterprise would science it all and would do this, that, and the other, and all the 40K nerds are going fucking mental because this Star Trek fan dare say that the God Emperor could be defeated by these pacifists, and it's just like.
I like the response that the Warhammer 40K universe would not get into a fight with Star Trek because Star Trek would declare them a non-warp capable civilization, and that's covered by the Prime Directive.
Yeah, exactly. That's it, isn't it? Yeah. Brilliant. Oh man.
That's for some reason an even bigger insult than saying they'd win in a straight fight.
Oh man, yeah, it's a wacky world, TikTok. It really is. You were saying that you're not in the fund, so you don't get any money. Not that they pay you very much, to be honest. Oh, and Pete is setting fire to his house at this moment in time.
Well, it's that sort of mood.
He's muted himself.
Okay. I can understand setting fire to your house in this day and age. It's the thing.
So, what made you choose not to sort of kind of the creator fund? That's it, the creator fund.
Basically, I was told you're just under a lot more scrutiny, and I don't need the money, and I don't really am popular enough to actually care about it. So I wanted to do crazy vampire stuff that might involve fake weapons and blood. So I decided, I'm not gonna put myself under the creator fund scrutiny because they're weird about that stuff and fickle. TikTok is a fickle god,
Big
and
time.
something like you said, random things blow up, random things get like suspensions and stuff like that, and it just becomes so much of a thing.
Well,
Should we
it's
should
like
we worry about him? There's like smoke and ash.
I'm sure he's fine. He's just got,
Okay.
he's the only man I know who he puts logs in the fire during podcasts and stuff. He's so quintessentially English. Excuse me.
He's off grid except for his internet connection.
Yeah, but you don't get very much. Like I get like that video of my dog Boromir. I got 750 quid for that video alone, but you get 2p.
Wait. You named your dog after the person who dies?
Boromir's he's a warrior. He's just sort of he's misunderstood. He's a bit of a pain in
He's
the
a
ass.
misunderstood.
He's a misunderstood
Okay.
character,
I mean,
he's just
naming
like my
your dog after a Sean Bean character is just setting yourself up for heartbreak, my friend.
True, but he's my favorite character. I've always liked Boromir. I'm a massive Lord of the Rings fan, and I always told myself if I'm gonna get a dog, he's gonna be a Gondorian warrior. I'm gonna call him Boromir, and that's what he is.
Okay, Boromir is a good boy. Faramir is the bestest boy. Okay.
This is it, because my dog is a pain in the ass, and he's got lots of foibles, and he's got lots of flaws, and that's why I like Boromir, because Boromir is a flawed character and stuff. Whereas you don't want.
As long as we agree that Faramir is best boy, I'm good about that. I'm good about that.
If Faramir does it, I don't think he gets a good showing in the films as he does maybe in the books. So there's a bit more to him in the books than there is in the film. It's the same with Denethor as well. Denethor isn't portrayed overly, like, in the books. There's a bit more to him than there is in the series, in the films.
But he's a jerk in both versions.
Yeah.
No, this is now all Tolkien character slander.
But yeah, so you don't get very much money in TikTok. You get 2p, well, I guess $2 to $4, not dollars, cents per 1,000 views or something like that, and you don't, and like you said, you're very much open to scrutiny. So there's a guy, TikTok Jesus, Scotty Wartooth, who's
I know him.
Been on the podcast before, and he's perpetually getting banned, and people just on him all the time. And I know a fair few people who have just been banned for stupid stuff. Like I had a video taken down for unknown reasons. And I still to this day don't understand why it was taken down, but it was just like, it was against the policy.
I used to do history videos, and I stopped just because I got tired of people getting really, really nasty about it. Really nasty. I just pointed out the T-34 was an awful tank, and all the Soviet fanboys came out to rail on me. I'm like, it was an awful tank. They admitted it was an awful tank. It was there to last for 2 battles and then die. And they're like, no, Stalin is daddy. And I'm like, oh, you people.
See, I did I've got one for Geek Pride, which doesn't have very many because I don't spend a lot of time on it. I've got a history one which has got maybe like 5,000 views, because I did a military history degree, so history's a big thing for me. But I've had so many videos taken down because I've obviously mentioned stuff. Like I was talking about the evacuation in Dunkirk, the miracle of Dunkirk and stuff, and I mentioned Hitler, and obviously that got muted and got sort of like taken down. And stuff, and
you have to call him funny mustache man.
Yeah.
And it's just all sorts of stuff like that. But you agree, as a military historian, that the T-34 was a terrible tank.
Yeah. Yeah. The guy who created it, Stalin basically told him to sort of drive it to them, and he nearly died doing it because it was just like there was no heating and it was middle of the winter and the tank just about made it. It was just, yeah, I can't even remember the name of the guy, but
Yeah.
yeah, do love history. What's your favorite era?
I like, actually, if you had, it's not an era, it would be a topic. My favorite thing is the history of food.
Interesting.
That is my favorite topic because it's amazing how much history is told through food and what people eat and when and all that. Like, but if I had to pick an era, I'd have to say Roman. Roman history is my jam, or just the classical era in general, classical Europe.
Yeah, so
Although I do have a soft spot for the Sumerians. I really do like the Sumerians.
So I kind of could agree up doing sort of, obviously I was a massive Sean Bean fan, so Sharp was a massive thing for me. So Napoleonics, I grew up doing Napoleonics. So I did, when I did my degree, I did stuff on.
I only know about Sharp because I've seen some clips on YouTube. It seems to be a much bigger deal over in the UK than it is here.
Everybody loves Sharp. Yeah, he's a man's man. Sharp, and he doesn't die as well. So it's just like, you know, Sean Bean's one of the main characters he's played for many years, and he didn't die. So, you know.
Excellent.
Yeah. It's worth a watch. Definitely worth a watch. So I did Napoleonics, World War II. We did a bit of Vietnam and stuff. And then I sort of, after university, that's when I started getting into my classical stuff, because I was very much, my father used to tell me stories about the Spartans and about classical Greek sort of stories. And then after university, I started getting really deep into sort of, there's an author called Tom Holland, who does he does Persian Fire, he does the Rubicon, he does loads of classical stuff, and he's so good. The books are just amazing, and it just he writes them in a way that it's narrative, but it's in a sort of storytelling sort of way, and it's really sort of easy to digest. And
I always liked Harry Turtledove. He was one of my favorite authors, if you've ever read any of his stuff, which is alternate history. But he's also an historian, so he does very well thought out alternate history, like, and, you know, also just off the wall stuff. Like, but he does very well realized characters who are based on real people. But I made the completely rational decision to become a Latin student in high school, and I did 6 years of Latin. And I got to the point where you were just translating like primary texts and stuff like that. Like you were just translating the Aeneid and all that. And a lot of the Latin textbooks are also history textbooks because they teach you about, you know, Roman civilization and daily life and that sort of thing. And so we did all that kind of stuff. And that's where I got my love of like Roman history. But this really speaks to like kind of my live action stuff, actually, is that I've always been more interested in day-to-day life. Like I never cared so much about what General X did or Emperor Y did, so much to be like, how did a Roman go and make money? How did they go buy a loaf of bread? What did they do? You know, what was it like to actually live in that time as part of the other 99% of the population? And I've always found that way more fascinating as kind of a realization. One of the books that I really appreciate like that is Salta World History, which is just about like how important salt was to the ancient world and to ancient economies, and how spy masters would watch salt markets in order to determine who was going to war. And these like little touches, you know, one of my favorite things I've used both in LARP and just as a history book is there's a book called Fantastic Feasts, which is just about like the surviving like medieval and early Renaissance recipes that we have for food. And it really talks about like how to make dandelion soup and things like that. And I love those kind of slices of life. One of the things I loved about the HBO shows Rome and Deadwood
Rome was
is
so
there was
good.
yeah, there was that had such an emphasis on how do these people live?
Yeah.
Like not the big sweeping laws and declarations of war, but what did you eat for breakfast? You know, what did you do from day to day? What did you expect from the world? And that always like kind of informed you know, when I did RPGs, it was strangely informative because I go through the trouble of describing things like this is how you slept, this is how you woke up, this is what you ate for breakfast, to give that kind of more immersive feel to it and to make it feel like you're actually in a living, breathing space. Did you drink coffee? What did you drink instead of coffee? That sort of stuff.
So, what is there any sort of you obviously what was the name of the book about the food book that you just said?
Fantastic Feast.
Fantastic Feast. Who's that by?
It is by Fabulous Feast, Medieval Cookery.
Oh, brilliant. Okay.
And it is by Madeline Pellner Kosman, Kosman.
All right, give that a whirl. Because it's true, because I did military history degree, so it was all battles and fighting and stuff like that. But you're right. Some of the actual mundane day-to-day stuff is really interesting. And I'm like you. Like I watched a series about medieval food. And apparently, like salmon, like you think about salmon now, it's like quite a sort of posh sort of food. But salmon was sort of what peasants would eat. Peasants would eat salmon and stuff. The upper class sort of kings and queens and lords wouldn't eat that. And it was just lots of sort of weird stuff that back then, they would they would sort of have different views on what was posh and what wasn't, and how like the Elizabethans would sort of black their teeth out because they wanted to be seen as they had lots of sugar. So if they had black teeth, it was because they were rich enough to have all this sugar. And if they couldn't sort of rot their teeth, they would black them out with like whatever they could.
One of the more amusing things, a friend of mine did Renaissance Fair in California, and at the end of the Ren Fair season, they would have a feast, and if you played a noble, you would eat noble food, and if you were one of the guard or one of the peasants, you would eat peasant food or the guardsman's food. So all period appropriate food. So the poor guardsmen and peasants were eating this high quality rye bread and this like sirloin and beef steaks and all these parts thing, while the nobles had to eat things like pheasant and beef heart and head cheese and all these things that was considered very posh back then. And it was almost a revenge for having to like, oh, you want to eat like a king, huh? This is how kings actually ate.
Well, we like I've been to it a couple of times. There's a place called Coombe Abbey, which is sort of down towards Birmingham direction, I think. And they have this sort of medieval banquet night, and you turn up, you dress up in medieval garb. I've got a load of stuff upstairs that I sort of dressed up in, and you have an actual medieval banquet where they have like period appropriate music, they have entertainment, and they come out with sort of like food that you would have had on the day at the time. It's amazing, so good, so much fun. Never had so much fun in my life. It was brilliant.
And that's kind of a LARP adjacent sort of thing. And there's a lot of LARPs, like the really immersive ones, which will actually serve period appropriate rations and things like that. It's very interesting, like dried meats and sweet meats and stuff like that.
Right. Sorry.
I'd like to apologise for the fire alarm going off. Literally, we've just had the latest storm come down from Scotland, and I've had a load of smoke, a load of wind go down my chimney and blow smoke out into the room. The fire alarms went off. The kids woke up. My wife's in the shower, so I apologise for the interruption.
Oh, it's all right.
Matt was
it's
like,
all right.
"Is he okay? Is his room actually on fire? There's smoke and stuff."
No, it was basically smoke venting from the stove. And unfortunately, wife was in the shower, kids were in bed, like, down to me, so I apologise for that. That was very professional. I've been doing this for 2 years now, and it's the first time it's happened, so sorry, I apologise.
Of course, I'm the one who gets it. Of course.
So, when you're not LARPing, when you're not sort of organising your events and things, what else do you do? What's your thing?
I'm pretty much a gamer geek all around. You know, I play, especially under lockdown and COVID. I've been playing a lot of online games with friends. Valheim is a perennial favorite right now. I also play tabletop RPGs online with a bunch of my friends. You know, I do Mage the Ascension, Vampire the Masquerade, World of Darkness. Yep.
I like how you mentioned Mage first.
Well, actually, Mage is my favorite.
Yes.
And Vampire is a close second, but Mage is my favorite of the World of Darkness books.
Likewise, I've got my copy of Mage up there. Yeah, for me, that's always been my go-to game in the World of Darkness.
Yep, right here.
Very nice. Is that the M20 version? Yes, that is the brick.
That is the brick, the doorstop version. Yeah. I love it to death, though. It is one of my favorite editions of it.
Yeah, it's. What was your take on V5?
I liked it.
Yeah,
I do like it. I like I'm a huge Sabbat fan, and I even like the Sabbat version of it. I think the rules are a lot more flexible.
Yeah,
I really like the hunger dice system.
exactly.
I really like that it really captures more that you're a vampire trying to be human rather than you're a human with vampire powers, which I think was more of the feel of the previous editions. I like that they cut back on a lot of the superpowers. I wish there was more material for it, but now they're coming out with more as time goes on. I really like the Sabbat guide and how they've kind of reimagined again as a boogeyman. So overall, I liked it. I mean, obviously, there's some things that I'm not that wasn't 100% with me. The character creation could be a little bit more streamlined, and the main rule book could deal with some reorganization, I think. But for the most part, I really liked Fifth Edition, and I think coming out with Fifth Edition was really important for the brand. I think that it made it relevant in a lot of ways to the newer market.
It was very much a reboot without being a reboot, I feel. Like, it brought everything back down to the street level, where before it's got more like global trotting, and it kind of stripped back down all the powers just to basically being the basic ones. So you weren't kind of picking a clan just so you could get that discipline. Well, no, it's not that simple.
Yeah, and I think that the stripping down, but also making the disciplines more modular was very, very cool. I like that, the disciplines have a little bit more flavor and flexibility to them. I really like the amalgam disciplines that they've come up with, and how they've had like a lot more kind of one-shot sort of powers for things like vicissitude. I really like the Zamisi rewrite was really good. I really liked how they did that. And the only thing I would like is I would like there to be a V5 Dark Ages. I really would like there to be a V5 Dark Ages, because I really like things like the hunger system and stuff, and I would really like to see that in like the Dark Ages setting is probably one of my favorites, and has some definite adherence. So I'm hoping that they do something like that.
Yeah, I was surprised that the 5th edition of Hunter was announced as the next one and not Mage, but they seem to know what they're doing.
Yeah, I liked the new Hunter the Reckoning, and I did not like the old one at all.
Yeah.
At all. Where they've like, as you know, with the original Hunter the Reckoning, they're like imbued semi-magical creatures that have help from angels, and then the new Hunter of the Reckoning, they're more Sam and Dean. They're more they're just humans, and they're good at what they do, but they're just humans. So it's much more like the original Hunters Hunted supplement than like Hunter of the Reckoning. But I really like their approach where you're playing like outsiders, not members of any of the big organizations, who are just trying to, right wrongs and deal with the monsters that go bump in the night.
Have you ever watched the Ultraviolet TV series?
I have seen 2 episodes of it, but it was way more of a British thing than an American thing.
It was very much a British thing. And that was kind of very much human vampire hunters. And basically, like, they were kind of a government sanctioned basically vampire hunting agency, but they never used the V word. It's always just code 5s.
Yeah, and then V5 they call them blank bodies.
Exactly. I like the way like that where they don't actually explicitly call them that, because to call them vampires would be insane.
Yeah, right. And would get us all sorts of weird looks at the meeting, but we can call them blank bodies all they want.
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah, I mean, I think we kind of hijacked the conversation about. So, what do you do to relax? I mean, like you mentioned, like you stream games. Like, what do you do to put your feet up and chill out?
Oh, definitely. I'm a big fan of the comic books. I'm
Oh,
reading Grant Morrison's The Invisibles for the first
very
time.
good. On
Yeah.
first time. Wow. Okay.
I missed
that's
it when it first came
mind-bending.
around. I have a massive, like 1,000-page, like omnibus
Oh,
that someone
wow.
convinced me to buy.
Really
There's a really good vampire comic book called Philadelphia, which I can really recommend.
Okay, I'll check it out.
Yeah. And I really like most of the Vertigo imprint. I'm a huge fan of Sandman, Hellblazer.
Hellblazer. Yeah.
Yeah.
I check you watched the John Constantine TV series on here Prime.
No, I have not. Though
That's
I was one of the few. I'm one of the few people who actually really like the Keanu Reeves movie.
I liked it as well. I liked it, and you know what? He was on TV. What was on one of the talk shows? He was saying he would love to do another one.
No.
I thought it was really good. I thought it was
a very good supernatural action film.
Yeah.
Yes. If
But
if you had no hopes going into it, it was a good movie.
Yes.
It's right up there with Starship Troopers. It's just material, and it's a great movie.
Do you want to know more?
I go with that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I do love Starship Troopers.
Have you read The Adventures of Luther Arkwright by Brian Talbot?
No, I have not.
Check that one out. That is a really good graphic novel.
And I'm a big fan of most Alan Moore stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Clive Barker, Damnation Game,
that
sort of thing is really good. I find myself reading, currently I'm actually rereading Interview with a Vampire. When Anne Rice passed, I was like, I haven't read that in a decade. So I started rereading that, and I was actually struck with just how good it was. Like, it's just a very entertaining book. Outside of you could talk about how influential it was and how much it really changed vampires forever in our minds. But beyond that, underneath that, and I'm struck by this rereading it. It's just a very well written, entertaining book involving really great characters.
Yeah, it was a very powerful novel. I mean, and it's only become more popular as time gone on.
Yeah. I mean, most people don't appreciate that it kind of sat there and didn't do anything for 6 years until it just kind of exploded for no apparent reason.
Yeah, absolutely. It just kind of lurked for quite a while.
Yeah, and then in the 80s it took off, and then there was the movie, and I believe there's an Amazon series is coming up for it.
Yeah, I mean, there's also a comic series as well by Innovation as well.
I think there's been several comic book treatments of at least the Vampire universe. There was a gorgeous The Vampire Lestat book back in the 90s, I know, that I have a copy of.
It must be by Innovation, because I remember reading them and just thinking, I want more.
Yeah, there's just I didn't really get deep into the Anne Rice lore. I only read the original trilogy, but I've really enjoy just reading, and I kind of live and breathe games for the most part. I come from a long family of bridge players, chess masters, and pool sharks. So I've always Oh yeah. My uncle is a national championship pool player. My father are either masters or grandmasters at chess, and one of my great uncles got shot on a riverboat for cheating at cards.
Wow! Fucking hell.
He survived.
Do you know what? When you say pool sharks, it always reminds me of that episode of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air when Uncle Phil goes to the pool hall, and to sort of because Will's being scammed by this pool shark, and Uncle Phil's acting like he doesn't know how to play pool properly, and then he says, "Oh, you can win your money back," and he's like, Jeffrey, break out Lucille, and he gets his own cue out and then just starts playing. It's like so good, such a good.
That
line.
was my uncle. That was my uncle. He had his own ivory handled pool cue.
Wow.
Antique ivory handled pool cue, and he was one of the best players in the world by all people's standards. Yeah, he beat world champions and took their money because they thought they could. But that was how he made his money. Is that he hustled pool, and he took me to them sometimes. I could tell you some stories about watching my uncle get thrown out of pool halls because he took the wrong person for the wrong amount of money.
Whoops.
Yeah. I believe the phrase is that you can shear a sheep many times, you can only skin it once. And he had a habit of skinning sheep when he shouldn't.
Whoops.
Oh man, I love when you got sort of like interesting familial sort of anecdotes and stuff. You know, my dad's side of the family, it's sort of there's not loads, bar my great granny was boarded by a U-boat. She used to work on a a medical ship in World War One because she was a nurse, and she's got a photograph. There's a photograph of the U-boat that boarded her. And it turned out that one of the guys they were caring for was the son of the U-boat captain, and he came on board. So stuff like that. It's just amazing. I love it.
That's weird. That's amazing.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
And I got another one. That's like this is my mother's side of the family, so they're all like they're all come from Norman descent, so they're all the Crosslands, and they sort of like came over from the Norman conquest and sort of settled sort of conquered England basically. But his family, and I can't remember what side it was on, if it was during the War of the Roses, but basically if it was Lancaster or York, but basically one set of them, Lancaster or York, came into this my mother's side of the family's ancestors, it would have been a keep. I mean, it would have been a keep, or it would have been a fortified house of some sort. Yeah, and they basically killed everybody, bar the son and the daughter, and they basically ate food at the table, and left. And the whole thing is the son apparently waited till he was older, got himself a retinue of guys, and ambushed the guys who sort of killed his family and killed them all. And I was just like, wow.
I see. All my family was blacksmiths, dirt farmers, and like the only interesting story that I have besides like very, very old ones is my great grandmother fixed breakfast for the outlaw Jesse James.
No way.
They rode up, they politely asked if she had anything to eat, and she fixed them breakfast.
So no members of the family here at the Alamo then, or sort of.
Oh no. All my family are Germans. They came over and after the 1848 revolution, where they were politely asked to leave by the Kaiser.
Right.
And they came over, and so they were well after the Alamo had happened. But so I do have one family member who died in a armed insurrection against the Confederacy.
Wow. Okay. Right.
Yeah. Little known fact: the Germans in Texas actually rose up in rebellion against the Confederacy.
Wow,
and
right. Okay.
A family member died fighting the Confederate cavalry. So that was the most interesting thing that happened. Definitely.
Wow.
I can't remember his first name. Burns.
Burnside?
No, not the the guy who did the documentaries.
Yeah.
Something Burns. Oh, it's gonna annoy me now. I can't remember, but that the American
Kevin,
Civil.
It's
the American,
Kevin something.
Yeah, the American Civil War documentary that he did is like one of my favorite all-time documentaries. I can watch that over and over and over and over again. I love it so much. So good. So
yeah.
good.
Yeah, I used to live near Gettysburg, and if you walk down there, they would have people playing Ashokan's Farewell, which is the theme from that all the time. And then all the historians say, that's not actually a Civil War song; they made it up.
Yeah. Ken Burns, isn't it?
Ken Burns. There you go.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
I was close.
Yeah. Okay, so have you got anything coming up in the near future? Anything you'd like to tell us about?
So next year we're planning on doing Elysium Chronicles, and we're also probably going to do Cyberpunk again soon. We're going to be announcing our schedule for this year on February 1st. So if you want to check us out on JackalopeLARP on both Facebook and Twitter, you'll see announcements coming through on there about our upcoming events. So they're dropping. So that will contain information about the night in question and all that sort of stuff. Obviously, this is going to be a pretty light year for us because we're giving the brush fire to a little bit to time to snuff out as far meaning COVID. And we are going to kind of be tentatively kind of restarting everything starting February 1st. So that's where you get all the information.
I look forward to hearing about that.
And we're waiting for Pete to find a venue in the UK. Centralized Pete. You got.
Well, you're not the only person who's offered to track down a location for us. I'll have to be honest.
I do know of at least one abandoned wireworks factory about 5 miles from where I live, which actually has a public footpath running right through it, so it's really easy to access.
Problem is, when you have all these abandoned, there's like health and safety and stuff, isn't it? There's, you're going to have any event on, especially in the UK, there's health and safety to the eyeballs, there's none of this sort of...
walking tetanus factory. Complimentary side of asbestos.
Yeah, pretty much.
But if you can find a rave warehouse that we can use, that would work.
There's UK rave in scene is still going strong. Trust me, there'll be one around.
Right. Okay. On that note, we'll probably leave it. Thanks very much, Matt. It's been an absolute pleasure. Really interesting. I know very little about this part of your world, and it's been very interesting. It's something I would like to sort of kind of know more about. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a fantastic talk.
Yeah, it's been brilliant. So for myself, I've been Matt Geary. With me, has been Peter Ray Elson.
Good night, everyone, and apologies again for the fire alarm.
Good night, y'all.
And our special guest, obviously, Matthew Webb.
Thank you very much for having me.
Cheers, guys. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.